Lucas, and welcome to Food 101. Food, people. Let's talk about food. And today I have my special guest. He is the CEO and founder of Foodini, no other than Mr. Dylan McDonnell.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome, Mr. Dylan. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Sure. Why don't I give a quick background? You can probably tell Irish from the accent, but originally born in Philly and currently based in LA. Professionally, lawyer by trade, worked in big law for a number of years with a lot of the kind of global tech companies. Ended up moving more into the world of investment funds. But really, I suppose where this story comes in is I found myself in Australia a few years ago, still in my capacity as a lawyer. But I was diagnosed as celiac when I was 10 years old, meaning gluten free, which, as I'm sure many of your listeners will have plenty of people in their lives that have different food allergies and dietary needs. And I was just getting more and more frustrated over time as to how difficult it was to navigate dining out or ordering online with any kind of food allergy, dietary need, and obviously gluten free specifically in my case. And the more I dug into the problem, the more it became apparent that the scale of the consumer problem was much more bigger than I realized. That there was no comprehensive solution out there, and so I decided to ditch the law career and move into starting a company called Foodini to solve the problem of helping consumers understand exactly what's in their food and what was suitable for them based on various different food allergies and dietary needs.
Mr. Dylan McDonnell, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Thank you, and hoping for more and more empowering business to come. And today, let's talk about, well, this is already well known for everybody, food allergy. So, for someone who's newly diagnosed, what are absolute need to know facts beyond just avoiding a certain food?
Sure. So I suppose taking the United States to begin with, I think the biggest, I suppose, surprise most people is just how many people have a diagnosed food allergy. So in the US, you've about 33 million Americans who have a diagnosed food allergy. So that's about 1 in 10. Um, you know, just drilling into that a little bit further, I think kids who have food allergies, about 40% of them have more than one. So typically, if you have one food allergy, you actually have multiple food allergies. But then like drilling into like some of the other segments around this. So 33 million Americans diagnosed food allergy. You've about another 50 million Americans who have a food intolerance, meaning that they react negatively to a food, but it's not a medically diagnosed allergy per se. And then you also have another 70 million Americans who have a dietary preference. So think vegan, vegetarian, keto, paleo, low FODMAP, low carb. Essentially, they're following a diet for a personal reason, a lifestyle reason, whatever it might be. And so the total market here is about 173 million Americans, which is, as I said, a lot bigger than most people realize.
Mr. Dylan, tell us, what is the critical difference between food allergy and food intolerance? And why is understanding these distinction a matter of safety?
Yeah, I think the difference for someone with a food allergy is typically the consequences of consuming the wrong food can be much more severe. So, for example, many of the people in the food allergy community have what's called anaphylactics, which means that if they accidentally consume a peanut or traces of a peanut, for example, that can trigger a potentially life-threatening incident. Typically, that requires an EpiPen or quick medical attention to, essentially prevent serious injury or death. And unfortunately, in the last few years, in particular in the US, there's been a lot of high profile fatalities due to accidental consumption of a food allergy in food. And it's for that reason that transparency around what exactly are the ingredients in every meal that one consumes is so important, obviously for the consumer, who who has the potentially life-threatening condition, but equally for all the restaurants. Because again, most restaurants want to do the right thing. They don't want to make people sick, but a lot of them, unfortunately, just haven't documented that information in such a way that they can accurately communicate it to consumer to prevent an incident happening in the first place. So I think that's whereas an intolerance, typically, people have there's a range of different reactions from rashes to upset stomachs to any kind of different thing. But typically, an intolerance is not life threatening.
The journey to diagnosis can be long and frustrating. What does the gold standard process for diagnosing a food allergy look like, and what should people advocate for with their doctors?
Yeah, like not I'm not a medical professional, so I definitely this is my opinion only. But typically, like the amount of people that over the years as we've been doing this that we've come across who, for example, didn't realize that they had a form of food allergy. In particular, celiac is a great example where celiac is a disease technically, and whilst not a lot of people have very severe symptoms straight away, a lot of people don't really suffer any symptoms or very mild symptoms. But despite the lack of symptoms, they're actually doing irreparable damage to their gut and to their stomach that can have really, really serious medical consequences down the line. So I suppose my advice, my personal advice to anyone is if they're feeling even mild levels of discomfort or they just feel like certain things aren't agreeing with them and they don't feel as well after certain foods, next time you're going to the doctors, get them to, tell them that and get them to include those various blood tests or other forms of tests to just understand, is this something that is an allergy and is actually impacting me with potential long-term consequences, or is this something that just makes me feel uncomfortable and I'll try my best to avoid it for the most part, but at least I understand that I'm not doing damage to my body in the long term if I consume it, by choice or by accident.
Where some allergies, like peanuts and shellfish, often more severe and lifelong, while others, like milk or egg, are sometimes outgrown in childhood.
Uh, Again, I would say as a non-medical professional, that wouldn't be necessarily my area of expertise. I know there's a lot of data on, in particular, like kids growing out of certain allergies for different reasons. There's a lot of new data and experimentation that's gone on around, how if you give trace amounts of certain foods to kids when they're babies, it can reduce the chances of them having these allergic reactions. And then if they do already have the allergy at, say, a very young age, different treatments, including microdosing them with some of these allergens to then over time build up their resistance to again mitigate against those really severe life threatening incidents that can occur. um I think what's like most impactful here, and just also for listeners to understand why this is such a problem in the United States at the moment, or up until, funnily enough, today, there has been no legislation requiring restaurants to document the food allergens on their menus. So, for the most part, outside of some of the very, very big chains, this information isn't publicly available to consumers. And more importantly, a lot of the restaurants don't even have it documented for themselves in house. And that's what causes such a problem and such a, I suppose, public safety issue, is this lack of just simple documentation of the major allergens that are included in dishes. But funnily enough, about 3 hours ago, for the first time, California has just passed legislation mandating restaurant groups to label menus for the major nine food allergens. And Gavin Newsom has literally just signed it into law about 3 hours ago, having the bill went through the Assembly and Senate process over the last few months. And so this is obviously a major positive news for the food allergy community. It's going to result in so much more transparency, so much more safety. It's also going to be the blueprint now to roll similar legislation out in other states. And so it's actually really, really great news for the food allergy community in the United States today.
Mr. Dylan, tell us what is Foodini is all about.
Sure. So we are the dietary intelligence company, as it says on the screen. So essentially, we work with restaurants to help them document all of the allergens in their food. We don't just do it across nine, though. We do it across 150 different dietary requirements, preferences, and allergens. And once we have that information documented in a centralized source of truth, we actually enable consumers to view that information via a personalized menu. So today, if you look at a lot of the big, like a McDonald's or a Arby's or a Chipotle, the big groups who do this, they typically do it by PDF. So it could be a 30-page PDF matrix that's really hard to navigate and understand across the major nine allergens, which does give information around what allergies are in food. Instead, we allow consumers to create a dietary profile and then completely personalize the menu to them in a very easy to understand way, showing them here are the items you can eat, here are the items you can eat with a modifier and what those modifiers are, and here's the items you can't eat. And so we work with restaurants, we work with hotels, we work with stadiums, we work with online ordering companies to help display this critical data to consumers in an accurate and a transparent and in a personalized fashion.
Well, good luck to Foodini, Mr. Dylan, and management and daily life. Beyond reading ingredients labels, what are the less obvious hidden sources of common allergens that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think in terms of like, to your point around labels, when you go to the grocery store, items have labels. And when you like, again, day one, this can be confusing if it's not something you're used to, but typically the information you need to make an informed decision is on those labels, especially if it's across the major nine allergens, right? Because packaged goods in the US are required to put to label for the major nine allergens on packaged goods that you buy in the grocery store, for instance. The obvious issue is that when you dine out and you order a chicken curry at a restaurant, there is no label that you can review to get that information. And so obviously we have a solution that deals with that. But let's imagine we're in a restaurant that doesn't have our technology and isn't a major chain, so it doesn't have the allergen matrix. Typically, we always recommend that the first thing a consumer does is notify the restaurant or the front of the waitress, the waiter, the chef that they have that allergen and put them on notice of the fact so that the restaurant can, begin their process if they have one. And then in terms of, everyone who has a food allergy has been in the situation where they've said, "Hey, I have a nut allergy. Are there nuts in the chicken curry?" And a wait staff member looks at you, and you can see the uncertainty in their eyes, and they say, "No, I don't. I don't think there are any nuts in that." We always strongly recommend you have to advocate for yourself and push back in those scenarios where you are pretty confident that that person isn't sure. Make sure that you say, "I need to confirm you to confirm with the chef. Can you maybe, if still that's kind of you're getting a bit of resistance, insist to speak to the chef. Ask potentially to, if there's a certain ingredient in that product that you're particularly worried about, ask them to show you the label. So ask them to take the product out of the fridge and let you double check it so that you yourself have that comfort. I think it's funny. We know from data that the person who is the best advocate for food allergies when it comes to dining out is the mom or mother of a child with a food allergy, is obviously the person who cares the most. But ultimately, everyone needs to train themselves to be their own advocate, because no one is going to do it for you. It can be awkward, it can be uncomfortable, especially if you're in a group setting or with friends or coworkers. But if you do have a severe food allergy and that is potentially life threatening, ultimately it's up to you to be insistent on the restaurant in providing you certainty that they can serve you without that allergen in the food. And so my biggest recommendation is just for people to not be strict on that. And even if it's uncomfortable, you got to look after yourself first.
What are the biggest challenges of managing food allergy for a child, and how can a parents and schools partner to create a safe and inclusive environment?
Yeah, well, I suppose the reason the mother of a child with a food allergy is the most is the let's call it a super user in our world. But the biggest advocate is just for that reason. Kids don't necessarily understand at a young age just how perilous the situation can be if they accidentally consume the right food. So I suppose 101 is from day one, as you're bringing your kids up, doing your best to train them as part of their process in life, full stop, to ask those questions for themselves and to alert the adult in charge, and it could be the teacher in schools, that they have those allergens. Now, when it comes to schools, and again, there's a very big disparity in terms of how this is handled across the country and across different schools. But obviously, ensuring that the school is aware, that the cafeteria is aware, that there is food specific for that child available and planned to be given to that child as part of their meal every day. That there is a process in place to mitigate against circumstances where ingredients might run out in the cafeteria, or there might be menu switches, that any changes made are reviewed to make sure that the meal for that child is still suitable for them. Um, I know a lot of schools now are trialing specific allergen free menus and meals, and like entire offerings as being allergen free, just to ensure that that child is in the safest possible scenario. I know a lot of schools are, well, firstly, I know a lot of children, unfortunately, are so severely allergic that even traces of dust in the air or the slightest brush of the wrong food on the skin can create an anaphylactic event. And so a lot of schools, have separate tables, for the allergy kids to dine on, which is a kind of a sad reality, that there's that kind of segregation required at times to keep kids safe. Unfortunately, sometimes it's a necessary evil. But again, I think that's where the schools who are now in embracing fully allergen friendly menus, which with food that is every bit as good as the food that contains some of those allergens, creates not just probably a healthier offering overall for a lot of the kids, but then also an inclusive environment. And again, we know that this is only becoming more and more prevalent. We have one of our investors in our company has a kids with, I think, in their child's class of 21, 19 kids have food allergies, and this is in New York City. And of the 19, no two have the same food allergy as well. So again, we're seeing, to your point, in particular in children, this is becoming much, much, much more prevalent. And so better and better solutions, both technically and in terms of the actual food itself, is required in the education department in this country.
Indeed, interesting, Mr. Dylan, and emotional and social impact. The constant vigilance required for food allergies can be mentally exhausting. How does this hypervigilance impact mental health and quality of life?
Yeah, it can impact it for sure. And I think it comes back to, a lot of what we're doing in terms of, there's a lot of people out there right now who have food allergies who feel excluded. They feel like they can't safely go out with friends, go out with coworkers, go for the simple things that a lot of us take for granted in terms of, friends dinners, work lunches, Christmas parties, so they'll either not go, or maybe they'll cook themselves and join late, or they'll go and they'll constantly feel on edge and uncomfortable and fearful that somewhere in this environment they're going to get fed the wrong thing and become deathly ill in this public environment. And so there's a lot of research and data that has shown that kids with food allergies get bullied a lot more. That people with food allergies suffer from a lot more mental health issues and feel a lot more excluded, given the kind of knock on impact on their lives. And so that's one of the reasons why, again, we believe having this transparency in food for all these people who are impacted, which gives them the confidence and trust that they can dine safely, that they can go out and enjoy life, and food is a huge part of life. It's one of the biggest social activities that we do as humans. And so getting back that confidence that they can in fact live and do and act and enjoy dining out like everyone else is a huge part of Foodini's mission. And it is only possible when there is transparency as to ingredients and allergens that is then also made available to consumers to give them that confidence.
Treatment research and the future, Mr. Dillon. There's been a lot of talk about oral immunotherapy. Can you explain what it is and what the realistic goals are and who might be a candidate?
Again, I suppose as a non-medical professional, that wouldn't be my area of expertise. We, or me as a company, and Foodini as a company, deal a lot more with enabling people with allergens to dine out today, as opposed to curing allergens. From source. What I am familiar with, like I kind of mentioned before, is a lot of the processes and advice that are coming out in terms of feeding small quantities of the major allergens um, to babies to ensure that, or to help ensure or mitigate against them developing these allergens properly. Um, and in terms of other treatments, I know there's a lot of funding, a lot of research. I do a lot of work with FAIR, who are the Food Allergy and Research Education organization in the United States, and they, back a lot of initiatives that are helping to identify allergens in a more easy and maybe affordable way, and also find cures for people who currently have allergens. So there's a lot of work that goes in that space. Unfortunately, I'm just not an expert in that, and so I defer that question to someone who has a bit more expertise in that space.
The hygiene hypothesis is often discussed in relation to rise of allergies. What is the current scientific understanding of why food allergies are becoming more prevalent?
Did you say the hygiene? Was that the word you used at the in the question?
Yes, hygiene hypothesis.
Got you. So, in terms of why food allergies are becoming more prevalent, firstly, just to agree with the statement that's in the question, which is they are. So, year on year on year on year, the data shows food allergies continue to rise. And it's not just in terms of, more and more people having them, but it's also because um, diagnosis of allergens has is becoming more and more attainable. There's much more understanding that this is prevalent in society. Doctors are defaulting to add tests for food allergens to to their patients a lot quicker and a lot earlier in the process. It's becoming easier to test for food allergens as well, and so the numbers are also increasing because just that awareness and diagnosis of people who probably had them for the last 50 years is just now, with the advancements in medicine, growing and growing. It's really interesting if you look at like the global landscape. There's a lot of I have a lot of random data points around this. Like, for example, Melbourne in Australia is the food allergy capital of the world. It has the highest rate of food allergens of any country in the world. Look at celiac disease, which is what I have. Italy is the number one country in the world per head of capital for celiac disease. Ireland is number two. And for Ireland in particular, the science, or the main theory is that when the potato famine hit Ireland a few hundred years ago and all the potato crop died, Irish then had to import wheat into our diet, which we weren't accustomed to, and so our genetically, a lot of Irish people built up that intolerance to gluten and wheat, which triggered a disproportionately high rate of celiac disease in Ireland. We know the Asian population has a very high rate of lactose intolerance, as high as 2/3 of the population. In fact, a lot of the data shows. So it's funny. Different countries, different races, different areas have seem to have a higher propensity of different allergens and dietary related issues. And I suppose it is just becoming more and more evident as time goes on and as data comes out as to what those are and where those are. And obviously, the scientists are doing a lot of work in terms of trying to figure out why that is.
Advocacy and a broader perspective, Mr. Dillon. How have food labeling laws like the FASTER Act in the US changed the game for people with allergies, and where do there still need to be improvements?
Yeah. So again, in the last decade, there's definitely been a lot of progression here. So first was the regulation that was brought in around labeling of consumer packaged goods that you buy in a grocery store and ensuring that those were labeled for the major 9 food allergens. As I mentioned, the law that just passed in California now mandates any restaurant group with 20 locations, with at least one of them in California, to label their menus for food allergens as well. And so that is going to impact pretty much every mid-market and enterprise chain in the country that has any form of a location in California. So that's going to have a lot wider reaching impact than just in California, because most of these chains are going to publish that information there, but they're going to publish it everywhere else, because the nature of a chain is that they tend to have consistent experiences across all of their locations, not just in certain areas. And what's coming down the line is, we already know that the senator in California is going to go back and look to get this to apply to every restaurant in California, including, your local corner cafe. We also know that in New York, there's similar legislation already in progress that is also going to mandate food allergy labeling in the state of New York. And Illinois and Oregon are going to be close behind as well. So we really view this SB 68 California legislation as just the first domino to fall towards, more broadly speaking, a world where every restaurant and every food service provider in the country, as a public health and safety matter, needs to just do the process of documenting the ingredients and allergen in their foods to ensure that those 33 million Americans that have those allergens can safely dine out. And so we've made progress. There's still a way to go. We're way behind where Europe is on this, in this regard, and places like Australia, but we're beginning to catch up. And I envision a lot of moving parts and a lot of more legislation, and it's already happening. The MAHA as well is bringing a lot of additional kind of tangential legislation in this regard as well. So over the next number of months, I think you can expect to see more and more legislation and regulation requiring better and better standards in this regard.
Well, Mr. Dylan, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 is second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Comedy 101 is second season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101 Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 review and Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Dylan, if you could leave our viewers or audience with one key message about living well and thriving with a food allergy, what would it be?
I think it's to not allow it to dominate your life. It's obviously a serious issue. I know a lot of people are impacted heavily and it's stressful, but there is a way to, live normally and as close to other people as possible. It requires work, but ultimately I think making sure that, to the most part, your social, your family, your friend, your work life isn't too heavily impacted, by doing your due diligence, by ringing up restaurants, by asking owners, by insisting on the information that you need to have that safe experience, is the kind of fundamental part one. If you feel unwell, go to the doctor and try and get that diagnosis, in case that is what is impacting you, or in case it's something else. And then I suppose with the cheeky ask from Foodini's perspective, if you know any restaurant owners or cafe owners or people who work in the food restaurant space, let them know that we're there, that we exist, that we're here to help them provide this transparency to consumers, because ultimately that is the key to this, whether it's with using Foodini or using another mechanism. Documenting the ingredients in the food and the allergens in the food is the critical step to ensure that the food allergy community can dine safely. And so ultimately that's what we advocate for the most.
Mr. Dylan McDonnell, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your business, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Yeah, like as kind of just mentioned, Foodini that's FOODINI.co is our website. Check us out. Send us to anyone you think might be interested in learning more, and feel free to reach out directly if you have any questions. yeah, you should be able to find all our details on the website.
Yes, people support Mr. Dylan McDonnell, because if you support him, for sure, more and more food they need to come. So, Mr. Dylan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
More to come, people. See you soon.